Welcome, you're watching Kaleidoscope Srilanka Live News Capsule. The relationship between the United States and Sri Lanka is 76 years old, and the strength of the relationship is reflected in the fact that US assistance to Sri Lanka has totaled more than $2 billion since 1948, and that since 1979, the US has remained the single largest buyer of Sri Lankan exports. However, it is good to take stock of trade, commerce and social engagement between the two countries as the new Trump administration comes into play. Explaining the scenario is President of the American Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka, Shirendra Lawrence. What are the US sentiments about Sri Lanka now, given that the new administration is in place here?
In the context of the current changes here and from the US perspective, I think if I just touch on three specific areas, I think governance is the first and most important thing. The fact that the new administration here has at least initially indicated that eliminating corruption, good governance and so on is important to them, I think that's a big positive, so sort of tick a box there. I think the economic stability that we've seen over recent months has certainly encouraged the US that Sri Lanka is a good option for investment and so on. So I think there's a positive spin on the economic side and economic progress. From a global positioning point, we're seated in a very, very strategic location. So I think if you consider all of these things, I'd look at it as right now it's very positive and we would hope it remains that way.
So what is US trade looking like in this current context, and also the fact that there's the Trump administration coming in?
I think the Trump administration, the Republicans in general and Trump in particular, is seen as significantly wanting to reduce international trade, but it's more driven towards China and the significant dependence on the US. I think we need to be mindful that the US imports from China have been something in the region of 3 times what China imports from the US. So regardless of the politics, I think we would be understanding that there would be some pressure to reduce that dependency. And in fact, if you look at the progress over the last few years, Chinese imports into the US used to be 500 billion plus just 3 to 4 years ago. And over the last year or so, it's reduced down to under 400 million. So we're already seeing a significant reduction. And that trade has to go somewhere. And I think I certainly see this as an opportunity for us to increase our trade with the USA. At the end of the day, we only need to pick up a very, very small percentage of that very large number, and it would make a significant improvement in our exports. The TIFA agreement is up for discussion next year, so I think spring, summer of 25, we should see some discussions of that. So we'd hope that there'd be some positives out of that. And also the GSP regulation, which actually went out of date and hasn't been renewed in the last few years, is likely to be renewed, that is expected. And interestingly, it's expected to be retrospective. So it's probable that countries that have benefited, and we have benefited, although some of our exports like apparel didn't benefit from GSP, there were other areas that benefited. So I think that's a positive there as well.
Shirendra, given that Trump policies are generally known to be inflationary and that the US is a major exporter for Sri Lanka, what would those policies do for countries like ours?
The reason for the inflationary concern or concern on inflation is because of the higher expected tariffs, the fact that deportation of illegal immigrants is likely to happen, and there are a number of other factors. So yes, it's probable or possible that the inflation will go up, and this will then lead to probably a weaker dollar. So I think our concern is what happens as the dollar gets weaker, because there are some advantages, but there could be bigger disadvantages because it will make our products more expensive. I think the key point here is that it'll impact most of our competitors as well. So I think it's something we'll all have to deal with. And since the net effect that the Trump administration will be looking for would be a reduction of imports and encouraging US manufacturing, I think it's something to watch out for. But as I said, I don't think we should be overly concerned. Of course, maybe it's an opportunity for more Sri Lankan companies to look at investing in the US. in setting up manufacturing or finishing or whatever in the US. So I think there's pros and cons. It's one to be watched out for.
If we are looking at other investments, other collaborations, what areas should we be looking at to attract the US in here?
The IT space is one that we certainly should be looking at very positively, both the software development side and also the business processing, outsourcing of business processing, these opportunities. I think the agri sector is another one that we could be looking at. Beyond that, I think healthcare is an opportunity. And of course, there is the tourism piece. I mean, the US tourism to Sri Lanka has been very limited. It's an area of focus, it's an area of opportunity. So I think there are other areas outside of the manufacturing sector as a whole. Now, of course, there are other areas within the manufacturing sector as well, other than our traditional exports that we can focus on as well. But I think the key would be to focus outside of manufacturing sector.
So what are the strengths that Sri Lanka has that can be maximized to ensure that we manage the downsides and also optimize the upsides?
So firstly, I think we should be mindful of the fact that we've had very strong relations with the United States for some 75 years. So we have and net it's been a good relationship. Of course, like with any bilateral relationship, it's had its ups and downs, but net it's a positive. So I think we should be, we look at it as a positive opportunity. I think for American companies, working with Sri Lankan companies have a lot of pluses. We have trusted business partners. English is the spoken language of business in Sri Lanka, so these are opportunities. And then beyond that, we could leverage a little bit more on of our traditional opportunities of the past. So for example, the high literacy rate and very trainable workforce is a significant opportunity in Sri Lanka. We've talked also already of the geo-positioning, but if you look at it from a manufacturing perspective, we sit on good shipping routes. It makes our products move quicker in that direction. And then we also have high social standards, and by and large, if you look at regional competitors, both from an ethical and a social standpoint, our compliance is considered to be as good as most, if not better. So I think those are the factors that we will do well to leverage on.
So how does geopolitics and the US role in these impact Sri Lanka?
I think if we look at the two other significant nations that we work with, being China and India. In the case of China, obviously the Chinese relationship with the United States is in a rather precarious place. So we need to be mindful of that. And in our relationships with China, perhaps be a little bit more balanced in our approach so that we're not seen to be leaning too far in one direction or another. Indian relationships with the US are in a good place, and we are a great point of access to India. So I think our geo-positioning in relation to India is a big advantage, and we should be looking to watch how these relationships progress and leverage on that. Geopolitical implications on the US dollar and oil prices also come back to us at some point, and we need to be watching this on the USD in particular in relation to servicing our debts that we're going to have to do in the years ahead. And of course, anything to do with oil eventually comes back to roost with us.
Remember, Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe, follow and like us for more.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.